You ever noticed how exhausting it is to keep disappointing yourself in small ways no one else even sees? From the outside, nothing dramatic is happening. You're not failing publicly. You are not crashing your whole life in one huge moment. Most of the time, it's quiet, almost invisible. It's you laying in your bed at night, thinking clearly for a few moments, making a promise to yourself that actually feels real this time. Something like, tomorrow I'll get up earlier. Tomorrow I will finally focus. I will stop wasting these hours. I will get back in control. And in that moment, you mean it. You really do. That's the strange part. It's not fake motivation. It's not some performance. For a second, you genuinely believe yourself. But then tomorrow comes, and that version of you is suddenly nowhere to be found. The alarm rings, you open your eyes, and before the day has even probably started, there's already a choice waiting for you. A small one that looks harmless. 5 more minutes. A quick check on your phone. A slower start. Nothing dramatic, nothing that looks like self-sabotage, right? But that's exactly how it begins. Not with some giant collapse, not with one huge mistake you make. It begins with tiny moments where you step away from what you already decided. And the problem is not even that you made the wrong choice once. The problem is that this pattern starts repeating so often that your own promises slowly lose all their power. And that's where it gets dangerous, because after a while you still make plans, but deep down you don't fully believe them anymore. You still say things like, this week I will log in. This evening I will work. Tomorrow I will finally start. But there's already this quiet little doubt underneath it. A voice that doesn't even sound emotional anymore, just familiar. We've heard this before. And when that happens often enough, your problem is no longer motivation. It's no longer discipline either. It becomes something deeper. You stop trusting yourself. And once self-trust starts breaking, everything in life feels heavier than it should. Waking up feels heavier. Starting work feels heavier. Committing to anything feels just so much heavier. Even simple tasks feel strangely complicated. Not because they actually are that complicated, but because your mind no longer treats your own word like facts. They become simple suggestions from your mind, right? Options, loose ideas, things that can always be changed later, depending on how you feel. And that is one of the biggest reasons why so many people feel stuck without being able to explain why. Because if you really look at it, most people are not that lazy, at least not in the obvious sense. They are not doing absolutely nothing. They are thinking all day. They are planning. They are stressing all day. They know what they should do. They know what matters. And they know which habits change their life or which task they are currently avoiding. The issue is not the lack of awareness. It's that there is a huge gap between knowing and doing, and this gap drains the life out of you. It creates this weird state where you are constantly mentally active but physically not moving. So by the end of the day, you feel tired but not fulfilled. You feel completely exhausted but not proud for yourself. You feel drained but not accomplished. And that feeling is brutal because it messes with your identity. If it only happens once in a while, it wouldn't matter that much. Absolutely. Everyone has some of this, right? Everyone has procrastination sometimes. But when this becomes your normal, you stop seeing it as a temporary phase. You start saying things like, maybe I'm just inconsistent. Maybe I'm just not built for that. Maybe I'm not disciplined enough. Maybe I'm one of those people who always start but never finish. And that belief starts shaping everything. Not because it's true, but because repeated patterns begin to feel like personality. That's where broken promises to yourself are so much more serious than people think. Most people brush them off because they look small. I'll do it later, right? I skip today. I will scroll for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, right? I will start after my lunch. I go to bed early. These things sound tiny, but every single time you say one thing and do another, you are casting a vote for a version of yourself you don't even want to become. A version that talks but doesn't move. That plans but doesn't follow the plan's fruit. That feels intense emotions at night and then disappears in the morning. And that's where the real damage happens. Not in your schedule, not in your to-do list or in your relationship with yourself, because your self-image is not built by what you dream about, it's built by what you repeatedly do. So if you constantly experience yourself as someone who does not follow through, then even when you want to believe in yourself, something in you resists it. Not because you are broken, but because your mind is looking at evidence. It's saying every time we made a promise lately, we broke it. Why should this time feel different, right? That's the reason why motivation often feels so amazing for one night and useless the next morning. Motivation can create emotions, it can create clarity, it can give you a vision, but it cannot erase the pattern you have built with repeated inconsistency. And if your self trust is weak, then every new promise has to fight against the memory of the last 100 promises you didn't keep. That's why it feels so hard to start sometimes, even when you genuinely want to. You're not just trying to do tasks, you're trying to fighting the weight of your own history. And the craziest part is most people respond to this in the wrong way. They think the answer is to become harder on themselves. More pressure, bigger goals, more extreme rules. They say from now on, I will wake at 5, I will use no phone in the first hour, I will eat no sugar, I will have no excuses, I make 2 workouts a day, I have the perfect routine of full focus every single day. And for 1 or 2 days, maybe even 1 week, they can force it. Absolutely. But because the foundation underneath is weak, it collapses again. Then they feel even worse because now they didn't just fail a small promise, they failed a big identity statement. And every collapse makes them doubt themselves more. So the solution is not to promise bigger. It's actually the opposite. You need to start promising smaller, but keeping it. That's the part people overlook because it doesn't sound exciting. It doesn't look impressive, right? There's no dopamine in saying tomorrow I will work for 20 minutes. That sounds so freaking small compared to saying tomorrow I will change my complete life. But one of those builds self-trust and the other one usually becomes another emotional fantasy. Because what you need right now is not a more dramatic plan. You need proof that when you say something, it happens, even if it's small, especially if it's small. That's how trust is rebuilt, not through intensity, through repetition, through evidence, through keeping your word in moments when nobody is watching, where the outcome doesn't look impressive from the outside. You say you will sit down at 10 and you sit down at 10. You will say you go for 10 minutes and you go for 10 minutes. You say you won't touch your phone until after this task and you don't touch it. That's it. That is how the connection between your words and your actions slowly come back. And once that connection starts rebuilding, life feels different in a very quiet but powerful way. You stop needing so much inner drama to get moving. You stop relying on the perfect mood. You stop needing to feel inspired first because there is less internal debate. The decision has already been made. And that is one of the most underrated forms of freedom there is. People think freedom means having endless options. But a lot of the time, endless options are exactly what makes you weak. Real freedom often comes from removing the need to decide over and over again. Because that constant deciding is exhausting. That is what drains most people, not the work itself, the negotiation before the work. Should I start now or later? Should I do this first or that first? Maybe I need a better plan. Maybe I'm too tired. Maybe I should wait until I feel clearer. Maybe I'll do it tonight, right? Maybe tomorrow will be a better day. Those thoughts do not look like effort, but they consume enormous energy of you. And when you repeat them all day, you end up mentally fried before you even begin. That is why you can finish a day feeling like you were busy the whole time while having almost nothing concrete to show for it. Internally, you were active. You were fighting yourself, negotiating with yourself, trying to manage guilt, trying to escape your pressure, trying to restart the day every few hours. But externally, very little movement. And that mismatch creates frustration because you know you were not relaxing. You know the day did not feel easy, but you also know you didn't really build anything with it. So you go to the bed disappointed, make another promise, and the cycle repeats. If you want to break that cycle, you have to understand one thing very clearly. You do not need to become a different person overnight. You need to become someone whose word has weight again. That's the real goal, not perfection, not flawless discipline, not some robotic routines where every day looks identical. Just enough internal solitude that when you say, I will do this, it actually means something. And that starts with fewer open loops, fewer vague promises, fewer emotional declarations that sound powerful for 10 minutes and then disappear. Instead of saying, tomorrow I will finally fix my whole life, say something you can actually respect. Tomorrow at 9:30, I sit down and work on this for, let's say, 30 minutes. That's it. Simple, specific, clear. Not because that alone changes everything, but because it creates momentum where you can either rebuild trust or break it again. And the more often you choose to keep it, the stronger you become internally. You will also notice something important when you do this. The days that feel best are usually not the days where you were the most hyped up. They are the days where things were already decided, the days where you fought less and moved more, the days where you didn't leave everything open for negotiation, the days where you didn't ask yourself every hour what felt like doing, but simply followed what had already been chosen. Those are the days that feel clean, lighter, more stable, not because they were easy, but because your mind and your actions were finally aligned. And that alignment is really the word here. That's what you're actually craving. Not more pressure, not more intensity, alignment. The feeling that your inner world and your outer behavior match. That when you speak, you act. That when you decide, you follow through. That you don't have to keep convincing yourself every few hours because there is already something solid underneath you. Once that starts returning, you feel more powerful almost immediately. Not because your whole life changed in 1 week, but because you are no longer at war with yourself every single day. And maybe that's the part that hurts the most when you keep breaking your own promises. It's not just the wasted time, it's not just the missed opportunities, it's that you slowly become split in two. There's the version of you that knows exactly what matters, that sees the bigger picture, that wants more, that dreams, that plans, imagines a better future. And then there's the version of you that keeps avoiding, delaying, scrolling, waiting, numbing, or escaping themselves. And when those two versions keep drifting further apart, life starts feeling weirdly painful. Because you can see your potential so clearly, but you can't seem to step into it consistently. That pain is so real, but it doesn't mean you're weak. It means your self trust has been damaged and needs to be repaired, like anything else that breaks. And the repair process is not glamorous, it is repetitive, it is quiet, it is built on small acts that look almost stupidly basic from the outside. Keeping your better, starting when you say you would, or finishing one thing before reaching for distraction, stopping when you are promising you would stop. None of those makes your story dramatic, right? But it changes your life because it changes how you experience yourself. And once you start experiencing yourself as reliable again, everything else gets easier. Not easy, but easier. Starting becomes easier because there's less resistance. Committing becomes easier because the promise feels more believable. Building habits becomes easier because they are no longer sitting on top of a broken foundation. Even confidence feels different because now it is no longer based on hype, it is based on memory. You remember yourself following through, you remember yourself keeping your word. That kind of confidence is quiet, but it lasts. So if this keeps happening to you, stop asking only how do I become more disciplined and ask something deeper. Ask, do I trust myself right now? Do my words still have weight to me? When I say I will do something, do I actually believe it? Because if the answer is no, then stop trying to solve this with bigger goals and strong emotions and start smaller. Start cleaner. Start with one promise that you can keep today, not tomorrow, today. One thing you decide and then do it without negotiation. That is exactly where control comes back. That is where momentum returns. That is where your life starts feeling less chaotic. Not when everything becomes perfect on the outside, but when the distance between what you say and what you do begins to close. Because that distance is costing you more than you think. It's costing you energy, confidence, peace, momentum, and your self respect. And this is the biggest one. But the good news is the repair begins the moment you stop speaking in fantasies and start acting in facts. So, no, this is not about becoming some perfect machine. It's not about never slipping or never failing or never having another bad week or so. That's not real. This is about rebuilding a basic relationship with yourself. A relationship where your own voice means something again, where your promises are no longer empty emotional moments, where you don't keep abandoning yourself in small ways every day, where you can look at your life and feel that your actions are finally moving in the same direction as your intentions. Because in the end, that's what changes everything. Not one big breakthrough, not one perfect moment, or one intense speech you give yourself at midnight. It's the slow return of self-trust. The moment where your mind starts realizing, when I say something now, I actually follow through. And once that becomes true, even in small ways, you stop feeling so powerless. You stop feeling split. You stop feeling like you need to keep saving yourself every single morning. You just begin to live differently. And maybe that's the real promise you need to make now. Not that you would become perfect tomorrow. Not that from tomorrow on everything will finally be flawless. Just this simple one thing. When I say something to myself, I want it to mean something again. That's enough. That's powerful enough. Because once your word has weight again, you don't need constant motivation. You don't need to keep reinventing yourself. You don't need to keep chasing a new system every week. You need less talking, less negotiating, less restarting, and more proof. Small proof, small. Quiet proof, the real kind of proof that you are someone who does what he says. And once that becomes true again, piece by piece, your whole life starts to feel different.